We have to break up, Melanie. I can't live without her. You'll never see me again in this country. Don't try to contact me. Goodbye." His voice was firm, almost emotionless, like he had rehearsed this speech 100 times before actually saying it. And then, silence. The call ended. For a few seconds, I just stood there, gripping my phone so tightly that my fingers ached. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. The room around me blurred, the edges of my vision hazy as if the world had just been yanked from beneath my feet. No, this couldn't be happening. I frantically redialed his number, my fingers trembling as they tapped the screen. 1 ring, 2 rings, then nothing. "The number you have dialed is unavailable." I tried again and again. Every time, the same cold, automated voice greeted me, an emotionless wall between me and the person who had just destroyed my life in a single sentence. I opened our chat. The last message from him was hours ago, a simple, "See you soon." How cruel those words felt now. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, desperate to type something, anything, but before I could, the chat disappeared. His entire profile was gone. I blinked, my heart hammering as I refreshed the page. Nothing. His account had vanished. I checked his other socials, Instagram, Facebook, even the rarely used Twitter account he barely posted on. All gone. Every trace of him had been wiped clean, as if he had never existed at all. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. What kind of person does this? What kind of person just disappears without a trace, without an explanation, leaving behind nothing but empty spaces where they used to be? I tried calling him again. Voicemail. I called one of his friends. No answer. Another. Still nothing. Panic started clawing at my throat. My breathing came fast and uneven as I scrolled through my phone, looking for some kind of proof that I hadn't imagined everything, that the past few years of my life hadn't just been a dream that he had now chosen to wake up from. I opened my photos. There he was, smiling at me from the screen. Pictures of us together, laughing on a beach, wrapped in each other's arms under a city's neon glow, watching the sunset from a mountain we had climbed together. I felt sick. Had it all meant nothing to him? Had I meant nothing to him? My mind spun, searching for an answer, for something, anything, that could explain why he had done this. His words echoed in my head. "I can't live without her." Who was her? A pit formed in my stomach as I thought about the only person it could be. The only name that had ever made him hesitate. The only name that had lingered like a shadow in the back of his mind, no matter how much time had passed. Amanda. His first love. I remembered the way he used to talk about her, the far-off look in his eyes when her name slipped past his lips, how he had told me about their history one night, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "She was my everything," he had said. "I thought I'd never move on." And I, naive as I was, had believed him when he said he had moved on. But he hadn't. He never did. She had been there all along, lurking in the corners of his heart, waiting for the moment he would run back to her. And now, he had. I gripped my phone so tightly that my nails dug into my palm. A sharp pain, but nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. How could he do this to me? How could he just walk away, as if everything we had meant nothing? Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not now. I forced myself to take a breath. My body trembled, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. He was gone. And I was alone. I still remember how it all began, like something out of a dream, too perfect to be real. If someone had told me back then that it would all end like this, I would have laughed. Because back then, he was my everything, and I was his. Or at least, that's what I believed. We met on a rainy afternoon, in the kind of moment that feels scripted, like it was meant to happen. I was browsing through books at a small bookstore, flipping through pages absent-mindedly, when I heard his voice behind me. "That's a good one," he said, nodding at the book in my hands, Norwegian Wood by Murakami. I glanced up, slightly caught off guard by the stranger's comment. He had this easy confidence about him, the kind that made you want to keep listening. "It's a little depressing," I said. "Sadness can be beautiful," he replied with a small smirk. That was the first time he caught my attention. The first time he made me think he was different. We spent that afternoon talking, first about books, then about everything else. He had a way of making the simplest things feel fascinating, like the way he described the places he had been, the things he had seen. There was something about the way he looked at the world that made me want to see it through his eyes. By the time we exchanged numbers, I already knew this wasn't going to be just a fleeting moment. Our first date was at a quiet little cafe, tucked away on a side street, the kind of place only locals knew about. It was warm and cozy, with soft lighting and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. We sat there for hours, lost in conversation, barely noticing as the day faded into night. "If you could go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be?" he asked me. "Santorini," I said without hesitation. "Then we'll go," he replied, just like that, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I laughed, thinking he was joking. But a few months later, we were there, standing on the white cliffs, looking out at the endless blue sea. That was the kind of love we had. Wild, adventurous, impulsive. We didn't just dream, we did. Paris in the winter, wrapped in scarves, drinking hot chocolate at a tiny cafe near the Seine. Japan in the spring, wandering through Kyoto's old streets, cherry blossoms falling around us like soft pink snow. Italy in the summer, driving along the Amalfi Coast with the windows down, my feet up on the dashboard, music blasting as he stole glances at me and smiled like he had everything he ever wanted. Everywhere we went, we left pieces of ourselves behind. Memories imprinted on unfamiliar streets, whispered promises carried by foreign winds. But it wasn't just the places. It was us. The way we would wake up tangled in each other, skin warm, hearts beating in sync. The way he would pull me closer in crowded streets, as if the world around us didn't exist. The way he would look at me, like I was something rare, something irreplaceable. "One day," he said one night, his fingers tracing circles on my arm, "we should just pick a place and move there. Start fresh. Just you and me." "Anywhere?" I asked. "Anywhere," he promised. And I believed him. I believed in us. Looking back now, I wonder when the first cracks appeared. Were they always there, just too small to notice? Or did I refuse to see them? Because for the longest time, I thought we were untouchable, that what we had was forever. At first, I didn't want to see it. I told myself that love wasn't perfect, that people went through phases, that maybe I was overthinking things. That was the problem. I was always making excuses for him. The late replies, "He's busy." The way he seemed distant, lost in thought, "He's just stressed." The nights where he barely looked at me, where he reached for his phone instead of my hand, it's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I just didn't want to admit it. The first real crack appeared on a night that should have been perfect. We were out for dinner at our favorite restaurant, the one where we had celebrated our first anniversary, where we had sat for hours talking about our dreams, our future. I had dressed up for him that night, wearing the dress he once told me was his favorite. I wanted to bring back us, the version of us that felt effortless, electric. But he wasn't really there. He sat across from me, scrolling through his phone, barely engaging in conversation. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing a smile, pretending I didn't already know the answer. "Yeah, just tired," he said, setting his phone down for a moment before picking it up again. I stared at the flickering candle between us, at the reflection of his distracted face in the window. He wasn't tired. He was somewhere else. And for the first time, I felt it, that gnawing, twisting feeling in my stomach. But I ignored it. I ignored it when he started canceling plans at the last minute, offering half-hearted apologies that didn't feel real. "I'm sorry. Work's a mess right now." "I promise I'll make it up to you." I nodded, told him I understood, even though I didn't. Even though deep down, I knew this wasn't just about work. I ignored it when he started guarding his phone, tilting the screen away from me, setting it face down whenever I walked into the room. I ignored it when I woke up in the middle of the night and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his screen, his face illuminated by the dim glow. "Can't sleep?" I murmured, my voice thick with drowsiness. He jumped slightly, as if he hadn't expected me to wake up. "Yeah, just checking something for work," he said, quickly locking his phone and sliding it under the pillow. Something for work. At 2 a.m., I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed him for answers. But I didn't. I didn't want to be that girlfriend, the one who seemed paranoid, the one who doubted. So I let it go, until I couldn't. The moment I knew, truly knew, that something was wrong happened a few weeks later. We were supposed to go on a weekend trip, just the two of us. Something to reconnect, to escape from everything. I had planned everything carefully, choosing a quiet little cabin in the mountains, just like we had always talked about. The night before we were supposed to leave, I was packing when his voice called out from the other room. "Mel, I think we should reschedule." I froze, my fingers gripping the sweater I had just folded. "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Work came up. I can't leave right now." I walked into the living room, where he was sitting on the couch, staring at his phone again. "Can't you take just 2 days?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's not that easy," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. That was when I saw it. His phone, just for a second, long enough to see a name flash across the screen. A name I recognized. Amanda. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked back to the bedroom, my mind racing. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye before heading to work, promising to make it up to me. But I already knew. The pieces were falling into place, whether I wanted to see them or not. And I knew, deep down, that something was coming. Something that would break me. I never thought it would end like this. Even when the cracks started showing, even when the distance between us became unbearable, I still held on to hope. Hope that he would choose me, that everything we had built together meant something, that I was enough, but I wasn't. "We have to break up, Melanie. I can't live without her. You'll never see me again in this country. Don't try to contact me. Goodbye." His voice still echoed in my mind, sharp and final, cutting through me like a blade. No hesitation, no regret, just a clean break, as if I was nothing more than a chapter he had finished reading. And then he was gone. No messages, no explanations, no trace of him anywhere. For days, I existed in a haze of disbelief. I barely ate, barely slept. My phone became a dead weight in my hands, useless, because there was no one left to call. The world moved on, indifferent to the wreckage he left behind, but I felt stuck, trapped in the moment he said those words. I didn't cry right away. Not until I found our old travel photos on my phone. Paris in the winter, Santorini in the summer, the two of us laughing under Kyoto's cherry blossoms. Memories frozen in time, proof that once we were happy. That once I mattered to him. And yet, he had walked away so easily. I had spent the last few years constantly moving. New cities, new countries, new adventures. It had been exciting, intoxicating, the kind of life people dreamed of. But now, for the first time in years, I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to be home. So I stayed. I turned down work trips, ignored invitations. I let myself disappear into the quiet of my apartment, the familiar streets of my hometown, as if standing still would somehow help me find myself again. One afternoon, restless from being cooped up inside for too long, I decided to take a walk. It was cold, but not unbearable, the kind of crisp autumn air that smelled like fallen leaves and distant rain. I wandered without direction, letting my feet lead me until I found myself in my favorite park. The trees were bare, their branches stretching toward the gray sky, but the park still held a strange kind of comfort. I used to come here all the time, before him, before us, before my life had become something unrecognizable. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes for just a moment. And then, impact. Something, or rather, someone, collided with me, hard. Oh, shit. I stumbled back, catching myself just in time, but the damage had already been done. Warm liquid seeped into my coat, the unmistakable scent of coffee filling the air. I looked up, startled, to see a man staring at me in horror, an empty coffee cup crushed in his hand. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he said immediately, his voice full of genuine panic. I blinked, still processing what had just happened. "It's fine," I said automatically, though my coat was definitely not fine. "No, really, I feel terrible," he insisted, already pulling napkins from his pocket and offering them to me. I wasn't looking where I was going. I was in a rush, but that's no excuse. Let me make this up to you. It's just coffee, I sighed, dabbing at the stain. It happens. At least let me pay for dry cleaning, he pressed. Or better yet, I'll take it to the cleaners myself. I'll make sure it's good as new. I studied him for a moment. He was tall, dressed in a well-fitted coat, his dark hair slightly tousled from the wind. There was something effortless about his appearance, like he had just stepped out of an old film. And his eyes, there was something kind in them, something warm. That's really not necessary, I said, shaking my head. Please, he said, his voice dropping slightly, his expression softening. Let me do this. I already feel bad enough for nearly knocking you over. I hesitated. Normally, I wouldn't accept help from a stranger, but something about the way he asked made it difficult to refuse. Fine, I relented, exhaling in defeat, but I'll pick it up myself when it's ready. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Deal. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number and I'll text you as soon as it's done. I hesitated for half a second before reciting it. Maybe it was because he was polite, or because he hadn't made me feel like an idiot for standing there, looking lost in my own thoughts. Or maybe I was just too exhausted to argue. Either way, I watched as he typed it in, saving my contact with a small nod. I'm Oliver, by the way, he said, offering a hand. Melanie, I replied, shaking it briefly. Melanie, he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. All right then, Melanie, I'll be in touch. And with that, he gave me one last apologetic smile before disappearing into the crowd. I watched him go, my coat still damp, my heart still heavy. I wasn't looking for a distraction. I wasn't looking for anything at all. But as I turned and continued my walk, I realized something. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't occupied by him. A week had passed, and I had almost forgotten about the incident in the park. Or at least, I told myself I had. In reality, every now and then, my mind would drift back to it, to him. Oliver. The way he had smiled, the way his voice had been warm yet effortless, the way he had insisted on taking my coat to be cleaned as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't expecting to hear from him again, but then an email arrived. It was short, to the point. Melanie, your coat is ready. You can pick it up at address. Just ask for it at the counter. Hope it's as good as new. Oliver. That was it. No unnecessary words, no invitation, just a simple message. And yet, for some reason, I stared at it longer than I needed to. I should have just picked up my coat like any normal person. No overthinking, no expectations. But something about this felt different. Maybe because I hadn't spoken to anyone new in a long time. Maybe because, after everything, the idea of having even a small, casual connection with someone felt foreign, but not entirely unwelcome. So I went. It was a chilly afternoon, the kind where the sky was a soft gray and the city felt quieter than usual. I followed the address Oliver had given me, finding myself in front of a sleek boutique-style store. The kind of place I never really went into, too modern, too polished, too far removed from my usual routine. The bell chimed softly as I stepped inside, and a well-dressed woman at the counter greeted me with a polite smile. I'm here to pick up a coat, I said, under the name Melanie. She nodded, stepping into the back, and within moments she returned, holding my freshly cleaned coat, wrapped neatly in a protective cover. Here you go, she said, handing it to me. Thank you, I replied, offering a small smile as I turned toward the exit. I had barely taken a step before I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was, Oliver. He stood there, dressed effortlessly in a dark gray wool coat, his usual air of calm confidence surrounding him. I wasn't expecting to run into you, he said, his lips curling into a slight smile. Neither was I admitted, shifting my coat in my arms. I have to say, he mused, glancing at the coat, it really is a great piece. You have good taste. I let out a small laugh. Well, I did buy it. That's true, he said, his expression amused. But you'd be surprised how many people buy expensive things without any sense of style. I raised an eyebrow. Is that something you see a lot? All the time, he said casually. There was something about the way he spoke, lighthearted, but with a hint of something deeper. He wasn't just making small talk. "You work in fashion, then?" I guessed. "Something like that." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek business card. "Here, just in case you ever need a second opinion on clothes." I hesitated for a second before taking it, glancing at the card in my hand. Oliver Reed, stylist. His number was printed neatly below, along with an elegant logo. But it wasn't the printed text that caught my attention. At the bottom of the card, written by hand in smooth, careful lettering, was a note. "I hope next time we meet, it won't be because I spilled coffee on you. Looking forward to it." And next to it, a small, hand-drawn heart. I blinked. "Did you—" I started, looking up at him, but he was already turning away with a slight smirk. "See you around, Melanie." And just like that, he walked out, leaving me standing there with my coat in one hand and his business card in the other. I didn't move for a moment, my eyes flicking back to the handwritten note. Something about it made my heart feel lighter. I didn't know what this was. I didn't know if it meant anything at all. But as I stepped outside, pulling my freshly cleaned coat around me, I realized I was smiling. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't because of him. For days, I debated what to do. Oliver's note had caught me off guard, slipping past the walls I had carefully built around myself. It wasn't just the words, though they were undeniably charming. It was the fact that he had taken the time to write them at all. "I hope next time we meet, it won't be because I spilled coffee on you. Looking forward to it." And the heart, that small, hand-drawn heart. I wasn't sure why it made me pause the way it did. I wasn't sure why I kept taking the business card out of my drawer, looking at it for a few moments, then putting it right back as if it burned to the touch. I wasn't ready for this. Whatever this was. It had only been a few weeks since my entire world had collapsed around me, since the person I thought I'd spend my life with had vanished like I was nothing. I wasn't in the right state of mind for new connections, new people, new possibilities. And yet, I couldn't deny that Oliver's note had left something lingering in the air. A question, an open door. But did I even want to step through it? I told myself no. I told myself it was just a polite gesture, nothing more. And yet, every night since I had received it, my mind kept drifting back to that moment in the store. The way his voice had sounded, the easy confidence in his words, the light but unmistakable interest in his gaze. It had been so long since someone looked at me like that. Not with obligation, not with boredom, but with genuine curiosity. And maybe that's what scared me most of all. Because I wasn't sure I was ready to be seen again. So, I did what I always did when I was afraid. I shut it away. I tucked the business card into my nightstand drawer, closed it, and told myself that was the end of it. A day passed, then another. I went through my routine as if nothing had happened. Morning coffee, half-hearted work, mindless scrolling, hours spent staring at the ceiling in the dark. Everything felt the same. And yet, it wasn't. Because no matter what I did, my mind kept circling back to him. I told myself I was imagining things, that Oliver had probably already forgotten about me, that if I ignored the feeling in my chest long enough, it would fade away. But it didn't. That night, I tossed and turned for hours, sleep refusing to come. My apartment felt too quiet, my bed too empty, my thoughts too loud. I flipped my pillow over, changed positions, pulled the blanket tighter around me. Nothing worked. Frustrated, I sat up, exhaling sharply. And before I could stop myself, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and reached for the nightstand. My fingers hesitated over the handle for just a second. Then I pulled it open. The business card was still there, resting neatly on top of a few old letters and forgotten trinkets, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I picked it up slowly, running my thumb over the smooth edges. "I hope next time we meet, it won't be because I spilled coffee on you." I sighed, leaning back against the headboard, staring at the card in my hands. I wasn't looking for a new story. I wasn't looking for anything at all. But maybe, just maybe, I was tired of living in the past. With a deep breath, I placed the card on my nightstand, right where I could see it. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'd text him. In the morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or just the weight of my thoughts keeping me restless, but as I lay there in the soft morning light, my mind kept circling around the same thing. His note, the neat handwriting, the small drawn heart, the way he had handed me his business card so casually, yet with so much intention. I had promised myself I'd text him in the morning, but now that it was actually morning, I wasn't so sure. What if he had just been polite? What if I was reading too much into this? What if I reached out and he had already forgotten about me? I sighed, sitting up in bed and running a hand through my hair. It was just a text. A simple response. Nothing more. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for longer than I'd like to admit. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I typed, "I have to admit, that was a pretty original way to give someone your number." I hit send before I could overthink it, and then I waited. I told myself I wasn't nervous, but my heart betrayed me, pounding a little too fast as I stared at the screen. A minute passed, then two. I exhaled, placing the phone face down on my lap, telling myself not to be ridiculous. And then, ding. I grabbed it immediately. His response had come in so fast, it was almost as if he had been waiting for it. Well, I do try to make an impression. Glad it worked. How about proving that we can meet under normal circumstances? Coffee tomorrow? I stared at the message, my lips curling into a small, involuntary smile. He was confident, direct, no hesitation, and for some reason, that made me want to say yes. "All right," I typed back, "just as long as you promise not to spill anything on me this time." His reply came almost instantly. "No promises, Melanie, but I'll try my best. See you tomorrow at 2?" I took a deep breath, then sent the simplest response I could manage. "See you then." The next day, I arrived at the cafe a little early. I had spent more time than I wanted to admit choosing an outfit, not because I wanted to impress him, but because for the first time in a long time, I cared about how I looked, and that was something I hadn't felt in a while. The cafe was warm, buzzing with soft conversation and the sound of coffee machines steaming milk. I found a table near the window, my fingers tracing patterns on the wooden surface as I waited. And then, just as the clock hit 2 o'clock, I saw him walk in. Oliver spotted me almost instantly, offering a smile as he made his way over. He was dressed effortlessly, as always. Dark jeans, a fitted coat, a scarf that somehow made him look even more put together. "Pleased to see I didn't scare you off," he said as he sat down. "I almost changed my mind," I teased, "but I figured I owed you a chance to redeem yourself." "Ah, redemption. Always a good motivator," he mused. "So, what's your usual coffee order, or should I guess?" "You can try," I challenged. He tilted his head slightly, studying me, a small smirk playing on his lips. Something warm, not too bitter. A classic with a little twist. I'd say, a caramel latte?" I raised an eyebrow. "Not bad. Close enough." "See? I'm a professional." He stood up. "Stay here, I'll get our drinks." A few minutes later, he returned with 2 cups, setting mine down in front of me. "1 caramel latte for the lady and a black coffee for me," he announced. "Black coffee? That's very serious of you." "I like things simple," he said with a grin. "Unless, of course, I'm making dramatic business card gestures." I laughed, shaking my head. From the moment we started talking, it was easy. There was no awkwardness, no forced small talk, just natural conversation, flowing like we had known each other longer than we had. We talked about work, about places we had traveled, about ridiculous things that made us laugh. He told me about his job as a stylist, how he loved the artistry of fashion, but hated the industry's obsession with trends. I told him about my own work, about how I had been traveling nonstop for years, barely staying in one place long enough to feel like I had a home. "And now?" he asked, his eyes curious. I hesitated. "Now, I don't know. I guess I needed a break from all of it." He nodded, as if he understood. "Sometimes standing still is just as important as moving," he said. For some reason, those words settled deep inside me. Time passed faster than I expected. Before I knew it, 2 hours had gone by, and neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. "Well, Oliver said, stretching his arms. I'd say this was a successful meeting that did not involve me ruining your clothes. I have to admit, I'm impressed, I teased. Then maybe, he said, leaning slightly closer, we should do it again sometime. His tone was light, playful, but there was something else underneath it. Something careful, like he was testing the waters. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if I should. I wasn't ready for something serious. I wasn't even sure if I was ready for something at all. But Oliver, he had a way of making everything feel easy, like there was no pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. And so, before I could overthink it, I nodded. All right, I said, let's do this again sometime. And just like that, it began. Over the next few weeks, Oliver and I started spending more time together. It wasn't planned, it wasn't forced, it just happened. Some days, we'd grab coffee and talk for hours. Other days, we'd take long walks through the city, exploring hidden streets and little bookstores, just enjoying the quiet company of each other. He was funny, charming, thoughtful in ways that felt effortless, and most importantly, he never pushed. He never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. He never tried to fill the silence with things that didn't need to be said. He was interested in me. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way he listened, but he never crossed the line. He let me set the pace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. Time passed, and my life had slowly started feeling lighter again. Oliver and I continued to spend time together, and what had once been occasional meetups turned into something more natural, something I looked forward to. He had a way of making everything seem effortless, of making me laugh when I least expected it. With him, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with me. At least, that's what I thought. Until that night. We had been spending the evening together at my apartment. Nothing special, just an easy, comfortable night in. We had ordered takeout, and he had made a joking comment about how I clearly had a signature dish when it came to choosing food. Pad Thai again? He had teased. It's a classic, I shot back, sticking my tongue out at him. He laughed, shaking his head as he took a bite. I guess I can't judge. You do have good taste. I smiled, warmth spreading through me. It had been an ordinary night. A good night. Until my phone rang. I had left it in the other room, not really paying attention to it, but the sound cut through our conversation, pulling me out of the moment. Do you want me to check who it is? Oliver offered casually, already leaning over toward where my phone was charging on the counter. I was halfway to the kitchen, but nodded. Yeah, sure. If it's important, just let me know. I didn't think twice about it, not until I heard his voice change. Melanie? Something in his tone made me stop in my tracks. I turned the corner and saw him standing there, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. He looked confused, almost hesitant. It's a number you don't have saved, he said slowly. But there's a man on the other end. He sounds desperate. Before I could react, the voice on the speakerphone made my stomach drop. Mel, please, just listen to me. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left like that. I thought I wanted something else, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, I need you. I need us. Just say something. I froze. My body locked up, my throat suddenly dry. I stared at Oliver, my heart pounding in my chest. No, this wasn't happening. Oliver looked between me and the phone, his brow furrowed. Clearly, he had no idea what was going on, but he could see the way my entire posture had changed, the way my face had probably gone pale. Mel? He said softly, but I couldn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I lunged forward and grabbed the phone from his hand, immediately hanging up. Silence filled the room. Oliver didn't say anything at first, and I could feel his eyes on me. I kept staring down at my phone, my grip tightening around it as if holding it any looser would somehow let the past slip through. I didn't want to talk about it. I couldn't talk about it. Not yet. But Oliver, he wasn't stupid. He wasn't blind. He knew that whoever had just called me wasn't just anyone. And he had questions. Questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Mel, he said again, his voice careful now. Who was that? I swallowed hard. No one, I muttered. I could hear how weak the lie sounded the moment it left my lips. Oliver exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But if you're scared of something, of someone, I need to know. His voice was firm but gentle, and that's when I realized he wasn't upset. He wasn't annoyed or impatient or frustrated with me. He was concerned. For me. I sat down on the couch, my phone still clutched tightly in my hands. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning with emotions I didn't want to deal with, but I couldn't avoid it anymore. I took a deep breath. It's my ex, I finally admitted. I heard Oliver shift, but he didn't say anything. He just waited. The one who left me, I continued, my voice quieter now. He just disappeared, blocked me, erased me from his life. And now, after all this time, he's suddenly calling me like nothing happened. I looked up at Oliver then, expecting some kind of judgment, some kind of reaction, but his expression didn't change. He just nodded, like he was taking it all in, like he was letting me set the pace. And you didn't tell me because? He asked after a moment. I hesitated. Because I didn't want you to think I was still stuck on him, I admitted. Because I didn't want you to think that I was broken. Oliver's eyes softened, and before I could even process what was happening, he let out a short, almost amused laugh. Melanie, he said, shaking his head. You think that would change the way I see you? I blinked. Wouldn't it? No, he said simply. Not even a little bit. My breath hitched slightly. You're not broken, Mel, and even if you were, that wouldn't be something to be ashamed of. What he did to you, that's on him, not you. And if he thinks he can just come back after leaving you like that? Oliver scoffed, shaking his head. Then he's a goddamn idiot. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. For weeks, I had been carrying this fear, that if Oliver ever found out, he would see me differently, that he would think I was damaged, that I wasn't worth the effort. But he didn't. If anything, he was angry for me. You don't have to deal with this alone, he added, his voice softer now. I know I'm not whoever he was to you, but if you need someone in your corner, I'm here. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed felt different, lighter, like something had shifted. Something that had been weighing me down for so long had finally loosened its grip. Oliver hadn't pushed me after that night. He didn't demand answers or expect me to suddenly be healed. He just stayed. And that, more than anything, was what I needed. He was patient, thoughtful. He didn't try to force himself into a space I wasn't ready to open. He simply let me know he was there, and that was enough. And over time, I realized something. I wanted him there, not as a distraction, not as a way to forget the past, but because he had become part of my present, and maybe, just maybe, my future. One evening, we were walking through the city, the streets glowing with golden lights, the air crisp with the first hints of winter. Oliver had his hands in his coat pockets, his pace easy as he strolled beside me. You know, he said suddenly, we never really made a deal about what happens if I don't spill coffee on you again. I raised an eyebrow, amused. Was there supposed to be a deal? Obviously, he said with mock seriousness. Because I think I deserve a reward for my excellent self-control. I laughed. And what exactly do you have in mind? He stopped walking and turned to face me fully. A kiss, he said simply. The words sent a warmth through me, catching me off guard even though I had seen this moment coming for a while. Oliver wasn't the kind of man who rushed things. He had been patient, always letting me set the pace. But now, standing under the soft glow of the city lights, I could see it in his eyes. He wanted this. And so did I. I didn't hesitate. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. His breath hitched slightly as I reached up, fingers lightly grazing the lapels of his coat before I tilted my face toward him. And then, finally, I kissed him. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if I was testing the weight of this moment. But the second his lips pressed more firmly against mine, the second his hands came up to cradle my face gently, everything else faded away. There was no past, no ghosts, just us. When we finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, a slow, contented smile forming on his lips. "Worth the wait?" he murmured. I let out a soft laugh. Definitely. From that moment on, everything changed. We weren't just two people who met by accident anymore. We weren't just casual friends, dancing around the possibility of something more. We were together, and it felt easy. Oliver made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. He brought out the best in me, made me believe that love wasn't supposed to be painful or exhausting. It was supposed to fit, to feel natural, and with him, it did. We spent weekends exploring the city, finding new favorite coffee shops, new secret spots that became ours. He would send me texts throughout the day, little things that made me smile, random pictures, inside jokes, dramatic complaints about a client's terrible fashion choices. If I see one more person wearing socks with sandals, I might lose my mind. "Some people just want to watch the world burn," I'd reply. Exactly. Some nights, we stayed in, wrapped up in each other on the couch, sharing quiet conversations and stolen kisses. Some nights, we dressed up just for the hell of it, dining in fancy restaurants where he would lean in across the table, studying me like I was the most fascinating thing in the room. "What?" I'd ask, blushing under his gaze. "Just memorizing," he'd say with a grin. "Memorizing what?" "The way you look at me when you don't realize you're doing it." My heart had never felt so full. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I reached into my nightstand and found something I hadn't touched in a long time. Oliver's business card.